Welcome to this ITpreneurs webinar on the good, the bad, and the ugly on service management implementation. ITpreneurs is the leading content and instructor provider for IT best practices training and workshops. Through a global network of partners, we offer the most comprehensive portfolio of training courseware, exam materials, e-learning, and blended courses for ITIL, COBIT, TOGAF, and many other frameworks. I am Connie Tai, Product Category Manager for IT Service Management Portfolio at ITpreneurs. I'm here with my colleague Aurélie Doucette, who is our Product Marketing Manager. We look after a number of learning solutions in service management, including ITIL, ISO 20000, Capner-Trego on problem and incident management, and TIPA for IT process assessment. I would like to start by thanking you all for joining this webinar. Service management has been in existence for some time. It is important because business expects IT to deliver value to them. But why many service management implementations go wrong? What can you learn from these missteps? Our speaker will share some of his insights on this topic through his experiences working in the service management area. So before we start the webinar, I would like to take a moment to introduce our speaker, Alex Hernandez, who is an ITIL Master and a Fellow in Service Management. Alex is currently a Senior Manager within the Service Excellence Practice at Accenture, whose mission is to improve client outcomes through the practice of service management and the ITIL service lifecycle. He has more than 20 years of professional experience in numerous high-end engagements involving business process transformations. He has been author and co-author of many publications, including one of the first self-study books for IT Service Management Foundations based on ITIL, and he has recently completed a book on ISO IEC 20000. At this point, I would like to hand over the session to Alex. Enjoy your session.
Great. So,
the agenda.
Okay, great. So the agenda basically will be discussing the key areas is the reality of most organizations. And we have a very simple way of showing basically where organizations reside in terms of service management, and I'll explain those in a very simple, simplistic manner that makes a lot more sense in the complex manner that a lot of times doesn't get to the point in terms of business value and understanding of the current organization. We'll then discuss bad and ugly service management implementations, examples of that, and there'll be an opportunity for the attendees to submit chats to the session. And Connie will be looking at those chats since she'll have access to that information and sharing it with the open forum here to discuss. And then I'll provide some insight on what I've seen in the industry regarding bad and ugly service management implementations. Then we'll talk about good implementations, the importance of awareness and training, and then really hitting on service management as a program, not a project, and really clearly delineate what we mean by that, because a lot of organizations tend to think of service management as a project. We implement it, we're done, and in reality it's more than just a project. And then there's a topic that I call enlightenment, which is key in kind of bringing the light bulb turn on regarding what's important when you're looking at service management. So go ahead into the next slide, Connie. So if you look at the reality of an organization, you can fall from one spectrum to another spectrum. You can either be in a very firefighting mode, focused on technology, siloed organizationally, you don't know the true cost of IT, you're focused on technical metrics, kind of incomplete. And then you can go to the optimized state of an organization, which we call good implementations, really focused on customer outcomes, demand-driven, understanding what's really needed in the market to help meet the demands for customers. Employee-focused also is critical. So in addition to customer outcomes, the employees need to really understand their true purpose in delivering value to the client. Focused on enterprises from an end-to-end perspective. So most IT organizations function in silos. We look at it from an end-to-end perspective. So service touches multiple technology towers, right? It can touch networking, storage, infrastructure, email, a lot of different databases. So it can touch a lot of different IT components, but we have to look at it from an in-depth perspective. And then what I call financial transparency or service economics, right? Do you really understand the true cost of that service and how you optimizing the cost of that service to deliver value to the client and business value? So when we're looking at service management, are you just looking at it from a process-centric standpoint, or are you actually looking at it as a way of providing value to your clients and supporting your guiding principles within your organization? So the 0 to 5 incomplete service, optimized service, if you think about it, it's really the maturity model, a map to the maturity model of CMMI. So we're kind of trying to show this in a very simplistic manner, meaning that if you're running in a very ad hoc manner, you're really firefighting unknown costs, very reactive. If you're running in an optimized manner from a maturity level, then you're running an optimized state where you really have an understanding of the customer, understand the demand, look at service from end-to-end perspective, have a true service economics approach to providing services to your clients, and provide business value. So let's go into the next slide here. So now we're on slide number 6, Connie. So I call this the bad and ugly service management, the red zone toxic state. So a lot of organizations are in some spectrum of this. Some organizations might be more to the left of the toxic state, or they might be more to the right, right? So every organization has a different DNA in terms of where they reside in the reality of their implementation of service management or their service management program, right? So, and the way I look at a red zone situation, you can compare it basically to a bad and ugly implementation of service management. It's The Walking Dead, right? Basically, these implementations move along aimlessly with no direction, wreaking havoc to everything they come in contact with. So if you've seen the movie Walking Dead or the trailers or whatever Walking Dead, you'll see these zombies, right? They're just moving with no direction or aimlessly doing things, right? It's like you're capturing these metrics and you're firefighting, doing major incidents, but it's insanity, right? You keep doing this aimlessly with no rhyme or reason, saying, okay, when are things going to get better? So you're basically in a zombie state. So we will try to get away from those toxic bad and ugly implementations within service management, the red zone area that I call. And a lot of companies are still facing this, and it's kind of amazing. IT's been around for more than 25 or 30 years, and we still have a lot of companies firefighting. In fact, a lot of engagements I'm in right now, they're still firefighting. They still haven't caught up to the time. Some organizations are doing well, but it's pretty funny that we still have these issues going on, right? So from perspective, so let's break these down. So we looked at focused on technology. So what happens there is when we're so focused on the technical aspects in providing service to the client, we forget about the final business value outcome, right? What's the final outcome we provide to the client? We're so focused on technology, the nice bells and whistles of what the technology can provide us, you know, the cool service management tool suites out there, such as Service Management, ServiceNow, BMC, other tool sets. And those are great tool sets, but again, you have to know how to use those tool sets to effectively provide value to the business, right? If we just focus on the technical aspects of IT and forget the business, then we'll start becoming toxic. Firefighting mode, so as you can imagine, major incident management. So if we're always fighting and dealing with major incidents over and over again without a strong focus on really understanding the demand of services that we need for our clients and doing really strong root cause analysis, we're going to keep having those same outages. Organizational silos. So that's really focused on lack of communication, right? So you could have different technology towers, but they're not communicating to each other to provide value to the end client. Unknown costs. So if you look at the cost of email, right? Most companies don't really understand the true cost of email or collaboration service. They install it, they manage it, they maintain it, but really understand the true cost of that service so you can, if you're a service provider, how can you effectively cost that service out to the client? And more importantly, if it's cloud computing services that the client's consuming as a cloud provider, you should have a good handle on what it costs to deliver services to that client that is using your cloud services. If you have a good handle on that, then you're not going to be profitable. And secondly, you won't know what to charge the client effectively. And technical metrics, An example of that could be the metrics are very at a very macro level. They're not very actionable, meaning that they're not targeted toward the business audience. So, for example, if there's an organization that has a business unit that has a very complex e-commerce application that supports the e-commerce transaction service within the organization, and they really want the IT organization to tell them, okay, how many problems have I had specifically to this e-commerce service that I provide? How many root causes were performed, and what was the root cause of those issues? And what if changes were implemented, what were those changes, and how did they interact and impact my e-commerce transaction service? That kind of information usually is not easily gathered, and mostly what happens is the IT organization will say, we have overall 500 problems, we've done 100 root cause on these, but there's no business context to it, right? It's really focused on IT and not the business. So these are the key attributes of a toxic organization that we want to move away from. Go ahead, Connie, go to the next slide here. So this is right here kind of it's kind of an open forum, and we'll give Connie, so in terms of time, right now, we have about 45 minutes. We'll give about 5 or 10 minutes of chat discussion in terms of what you've experienced in bad and ugly implementations, and then I'll share my knowledge of other things I've experienced, and Connie will be capturing that, because she'll have visibility to those key inputs and comments that you submit as attendees, and she'll maybe go over 5 or 10. If we can't capture all of them in this session within 5 or 10 minutes, then by all means, what we'll do is try to get a transcript of that, Connie, afterwards, and see if we can send that, share that with the attendees. So if you can go ahead and just submit your key chats or points that you've experienced when implementing service management, or were part of a service management implementation that you felt did not go well. What were some of those key attributes characteristics you felt that caused the implementation to fail or not be successful? So, Connie, let me know if you're getting any chats there.
Yeah. Right. So I'm following the to see if there are questions coming in.
Yeah.
All right. We got a question here about the difficulties to implement ITIL financial management. What's your view on that?
So regarding financial management, I think the challenge there is that a lot of companies really forget about the service itself. What's the core business process? So, for example, if we look at a financial institution, right, they have a claims service. And understanding the true cost of that claims service and supporting and providing support to that service, you need to understand, okay, what supports that claim service? What are the applications that support that claim service, the business application? What are the technical components that support that claim service? And then come up with an effective financial accounting method for tracking all those elements. So what are the indirect costs, the direct costs, your capital costs, your operational costs, all those specific components, your variable cost, your unit cost, to get a good cost model in place. So when you're trying to build a good cost model for a specific service, so instead of going from an IT cost, we're going to a service-based cost model. You should start at a service that's not too complex, right? So if your IT organization provides, let's say, 25 different services, right, you want to identify a key service that's important, critical, not too complex to dissect, identify all those cost elements that will be helpful in providing value, and then do a pilot of understanding, okay, if we provide the service to our internal clients or external clients, let's do a pilot with internal and do notional charging, which means you send them a bill of what it would cost if they use a service, and then eventually they would understand how that cost would impact them and would adjust accordingly. Notional charging means it's basically a bill sent to them, what it would cost, but they wouldn't initially pay for it. If it's an internal IT organization, most internal IT organizations don't have chargeback in place. And also you need to look at leveraging and enabling technologies such as Aptio and other ones that are out there. I wouldn't call another technology, but there's another technology out there. I think it's Cold Fusion or something like to that manner that can assist in automating and capturing those type of costs. And there needs to be a very strong integration between asset management and configuration management and service catalog. All those things have to be integrated in an effective manner so you can get an end-to-end perspective of the cost of the asset from when it's procured to when it's introduced into production as a CI and when to retire as a CI back to asset management. All those things need to be considered when looking at service costing.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
No problem.
Another question coming in. How to get people's involvement in the implementation and improvements?
To get people's involvement, I mean, one thing that you need to really understand and get people's involvement is when you go do a service management implementation, what happens most of the time is IT, the consulting company, or the organization will take a very process-centric view of it, and they'll forget about what the business drivers are. So what I would first state is that you'd want to really understand what the guiding principles are of the organization. So, for example, Southwest Airlines, their primary focus is the employee comes first, second customer comes second. And you want to make sure that your initiatives in service management, that you have guiding principles or ways of prioritizing those initiatives in a manner that's saying, okay, if we do this initiative, which ones are going to have the most impact to the employee, and secondly, which ones are going to have the most impact to the customer, and thirdly, how they're going to impact the shareholders, right? So you have to take that business value standpoint in meeting the business outcome. Southwest Airlines' primary is focused on making sure their airlines leave the airport on time and land on time, so maintenance is critical, right? So if the maintenance department that services the airplanes, they're going to depend on IT, and IT is going to have to make sure that the IT services they provide make the air traffic control, the maintenance individuals for Southwest, they have the tools they need technically from an application standpoint to do their maintenance well. So all those impact the delivery of the final service to the customer, myself, or you, that gets on the airplane, and more importantly, how's it impacting employee satisfaction. So you have to make sure you tie to your business drivers and answer the question, what's in it for me, and really have a strong theme around it, what I call an awareness campaign for service management. So going to ITIL training is great, but you also want to make sure you make it relevant to the organization on why it supports the core business drivers of the organization, and have a strong organizational change readiness component there. Understand the impact to each of the stakeholders when you roll out service management. Because if you don't understand each audience and how they're impacted when you roll it out, communicate it to that audience effectively, they're not going to grasp service management and understand why it's important to them.
Right. Another question about quantifying the value of services.
So yeah, quantifying the value of service, that's a crucial thing. A lot of IT departments will just set up IT, set up servers, set up databases, set up communications, set up just the infrastructure aspects of it, and then forget about that they have to service some internal business units, right? So they never created a business catalog or service catalog. And really, you should have a service catalog in place and understand what services you can be provided internally so you can quantify those services and measure them effectively. So if you don't have a service in place and you're just acting reactively and no established SLAs in place, it's hard to have an SLA without a service. You really need to have a service first before you have an SLA, and then you can quantify the service more effectively. And you have to make sure that those metrics link back to, for example, if you have an SLA metric, how does that support the business metrics? How does it support the end client? How does it support the employee? So they can't just be process-centric metrics. You have to be linked from the process to the business to the organization. All the metrics have to come together and make sure they support those business drivers of the organization and that service itself.
Okay, thanks. So one last question on the list that we'll cover for now, looking at the time, will be, are there any sample service catalog available out there?
Yeah, sample service catalog, you can search on the internet and there'll be some out there available that you can look for. Every service catalog could be different. There could be a technical service catalog, there could be a business service catalog. So there's different examples out there. In fact, there's some technology vendors that provide service catalog solutions. I think NewScale has some samples out there. ServiceNow has some samples out there of service catalogs you can look at, some very simplistic ones to get ideas of service catalogs and their implementations and how they look. And the thing with service catalog to understand is you definitely don't want to have 300 services. That's going to be too complex ideally. You want to start at a hierarchy of 5 to 8 services and then drill down. Maybe each of those services has 5 to 10 supporting technical services to keep it simple, right? You don't want to make it too complex for the individual requesting the service from that perspective.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Shall we move on?
So just to share some characteristics on what I've seen in the industry on bad implementations. One of some key factors, Connie, I'll just go these real quickly, and then we'll go to the next slide, is there's basically a very short-term focus, a lack of process integration, meaning that incident, problem, and change are not integrated. Too ambitious. Somebody wants to do CMDB, and they want to do everything in the world, capture everything in the CMDB, the configuration management system, when in reality they should scope it to a specific service. The other thing is lack of communication and training. There's no organizational change, readiness impact. You're treating the service management as a project versus a program. A lack of vendor integration, especially nowadays with cloud and most companies having multiple vendors involved. The multi-vendor aspect is not well established, meaning that the companies are having troubles in managing maybe 8 to 10 different vendors, and they don't have a way from an end-to-end perspective on doing effective vendor integration when providing services. And then unclear roles and responsibilities, and again, a lack of executive commitment. So those are the key things I've seen in terms of why service management programs fail, is that we can be too process-centric and forget to focus on the business drivers and guiding principles of the organization and being proactive. You can go to the next slide, Connie.
Okay.
So here's some good service management implementations, and there are some good implementations out there again, but they're hard to find a lot of great implementations. And the reason being is they require a lot of rigor and focus to be pulled off successfully. And I call this the green zone, right? So we start really thinking about the business outcomes and the employee, really keeping those in mind, and note the core guiding principles of the organization. So service management supports us. This is kind of the Zen state that I refer to, demand-driven. So really understanding what services we provide to the client, and understanding the demand for those services, and are effectively planning for the demand, so we have sufficient capacity to deliver the services when they need them, and they're available when they need them. We're focusing services from an enterprise perspective, end-to-end perspective, not just a process-centric perspective. We have financial transparency, meaning we understand the true cost of that service and can have an effective chargeback model that brings value to both the client and IT. And more importantly, we provide business value by really aligning service management to the guiding principles of the organization. Back to the Southwest Airlines example. If you go to Southwest and say, let's go and look at ITIL, or let's look at COVID, or let's look at ISO 20000, most Southwest will probably balk at that, right? They'll say, well, what does that really mean? What you need to do is come in there saying, let's look at a way to transform your organization. Let's do a transformation that's going to make Southwest profitable. It's going to increase employee satisfaction, and it's going to increase client satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Let's look at solutions to make that happen. That's a different type of conversation versus a conversation saying, let's talk about ITIL and see what processes you want to look at. That won't go anywhere. You really need to look at it as a business conversation and a business value perspective, and take it from there, and then look at how frameworks and approaches can be applied to help achieve those outcomes and support those guiding principles. You can go to the next slide, Connie. So here, in terms of characteristics, what I've found out to be good characteristics within service management, which I call the Zen characteristics, is that basically the process is definable, repeatable, and scalable. and it's integrated, right? So these key process areas are very integrated, and they're not working in silos. So change, incident prob, and the configuration management are very well integrated in supporting a holistic service management system. You have clear roles and responsibilities. You understand the cost of the service. You have a continual improvement program. You have strong communication staff throughout the organization. People understand what service management is and what their role is in service management. You also have a focus on it being a program and not a project. It's a way of life. And you also effectively use technology enablers to support service management, meaning you don't buy the tool first. You establish the requirements first and do a vendor selection process based on the requirements, and then select the appropriate vendor toolset to implement service management. You have executive commitment, and then you have holistic reporting, meaning you link business metrics to service metrics, and then service metrics to process metrics, right? It's not just about providing process metrics. You understand how those process metrics support the guiding principles of the business and the business itself. And really important is strong awareness in the service management training and readiness program. You have to make sure everybody's speaking the same language and terminology, but more importantly, the Southwest Airlines example, you have to relate it to their terms, right? If you go in there and just give a simple ITIL awareness training session, which is, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good to have the foundational components, but in addition to doing that, you have to translate it to their business language, meaning that when you talk about, for example, incident management, you need to give a solid example on why incident management is important to Southwest Airlines. So, for example, if you have a critical system or application that supports the maintenance crew at Southwest Airlines, if something goes wrong with that maintenance system, it impacts the maintenance staff to effectively and timely do maintenance of the Southwest airplanes, and that could impact the timeliness and arrival times of those planes, since they're not able to maintain them on time because the system's down, and that means the maintenance can't be done on the planes, and then they cannot leave on time, which then impacts revenue. You have to have that correlation and make sure that correlation is strong. If you just talk about changes or downtime without correlation to the business context, it's not going to mean that much to the employee or to senior management. So let's open it up to the forum regarding then characteristics of good service management implementation examples on what you felt in your experience is important when you're implementing service management.
So please, again, submit your questions using the chat or the question box. Well, while we're waiting maybe for the questions to come in, I have a question, Alex. What are normally the ITIL processes that an organization will give priority in the implementation process?
Yeah, so the priority of those processes, it will depend on the organization's biggest pain points. So normally what happens, you'll go to an organization, do an assessment on specific areas. But before doing that assessment, you definitely want to step back, and that reality chart that I showed you earlier, where it shows you firefighting stage to optimal stage, so you have the incomplete service to the optimized service, you want to walk the client through that first to really understand where they're at in those areas. So, for example, if they're really strong on the customer outcomes, but they're really weak on metrics, and they have a very focus on technical metrics, then we need to step back and say, okay, what process areas are impacting the most, and in those areas, which ones do you feel can provide the most value in terms of importance to providing, to supporting the guiding principles. So you need to have, for example, a scoreboard or decision matrix of effectively prioritizing those efforts. So, for example, if you come out at the end of the workshop session after identifying the current state of the organization from a simple perspective that I showed earlier, are you more in firefighting mode, or are you more in an optimized service mode, and then from there come back and then drill down which current process areas you want to really focus on. And then once you drill down those process areas, for example, if we look at let's say change management, right? If we look at change management and we have 5 recommendations for change management, you want to prioritize those recommendations based on maybe three scores, right? So one score would be 1 to 5. How much will this improve employee satisfaction, which could be a guiding principle. Customer satisfaction could be another one, and then shareholder value, right? Every organization can have key core business drivers, right? Some organizations might have the employee first or the customer second. It depends, right? So if you look at Southwest, we'd go through each of those to say score those effectively, each of those recommendations, and based on the scoring there, come out with a computation of value that would effectively rank those recommendations based on the importance to supporting those business drivers or guiding principles of the company, and then we implement those in that order. So in some organizations, business relationship management might be a very important area that they really want to focus on before they do anything else. In some organizations, incident problem or change might be a key area they want to deal with first because it's causing a major dissatisfaction with internal business units and it's impacting the end client. So it all is relative to the current state of that organization within their areas. But in my experience, usually most companies start with incident, change, problem, and configuration management. Those are common areas that companies start with. But I strongly recommend that you look at also service catalog management and business relationship management, because if you don't know what services you're delivering and you don't have a mechanism to establish customer satisfaction and measuring customer satisfaction, you're really not going to get that far. So I think those are 2 areas that a lot of clients and organizations tend to overlook, is the BRM role and the service catalog component. Pretty significant. Those are pretty crucial areas.
Right. Okay, Alex, we have a question coming in.
Sure.
What are the best ways to optimize processes with a big multinational organization?
So if you have a big multinational organization, in terms of optimizing processes, you first need to step back and understand how the IT organization is laid out within that multinational organization, right? So in a large multinational organization, you're going to have probably numerous IT organizations, departments, and you really need to understand who the key stakeholders are in those organizations and what their core drivers and initiatives are, because in a multinational organization in one region, there might be different drivers, while in another region, like in North America, you might have different drivers. And then, for example, in Asia Pacific, right? So you need to understand those drivers and be sensitive to those drivers when implementing service management, and really look at it in a systematic phased approach, meaning you get some key leaders from each of the core IT organizations worldwide, and they could become a part of a steering committee that represents a global service management board that would work in the end-to-end perspective to support the overall organization's business objectives. So it's basically making sure you establish that what I would call a global service management office. In a small organization, it could be a local service management office, but you could have maybe numerous service management offices multinationally, and then you'd have a global governance board or a global service management office that would coordinate those other organizations to make sure they have the same message, same approach, they're following the same process consistently, are on the same unified platform. In large multinational organizations, if you have 20 different IT organizations and they're all using different IT service management platforms, that's going to be a hindrance, major hindrance. If you're trying to reconcile and have a seamless integrated metrics mechanism globally, if you have different service management platforms, it can be very painful. And the organization needs to sit down and seriously understand their core requirements and do a selective evaluation of vendors and come to an agreement on a unified service management enterprise platform that will support the requirements.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alex. Looking at the time, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all the questions you put in, and we have to move on.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Okay.
So earlier, I talked about the importance of training, and that's so crucial, and awareness. So as you start getting people familiar with service management concepts, most organizations will have a basic understanding of service management and ITIL, but as more adoption occurs within your organization and people start becoming more comfortable with this, you definitely should look at more advanced and deep courses in service management, such as the capability courses or the lifecycle courses. Capability courses could be, for example, operation support analysis or support offerings and agreements. And lifecycle courses could be service strategy, service design, to get your core process owners deeper and knowledgeable in those areas. And more importantly, tie that with an awareness session that links the core guiding principles of the company to your service management program, coupled with deep ITIL training. I think the combination of those two things will provide a lot more effectiveness to the organization when they're implementing service management as a program, and also bring the awareness needed within the organization. And this figure kind of shows you the life cycle in terms of an organization. When you're going through training, you initially start with foundations, then you start going towards, advanced course, intermediate courses, capability courses such as the life cycle and the capability work streams that help you get to the expert program. And then there's add-on courses or electives you can take. I believe there's a service catalog elective you can take that applies to your ITIL expert certification. And then there's an ITIL Master credential. Most companies don't have to get to the ITIL Master. You don't necessarily need to have somebody at the ITIL Master level internally with the organization. I think ITIL Master is really focused more on the individuals that do some very deep consulting implementations around the world or in their local markets where they're doing consistent service management implementation consulting. That's where I feel the ITIL Master is probably most relevant. And then awareness courses and workshops that we talked about earlier. Working sessions are crucial when you're going through implementation. So what I want to do, kind of just open up for discussion here. If there's any questions on terms of training and awareness to the audience here.
Right. So again, if you have any questions, please put in the chat box. Well, I think we can move. Oh, so 1 second. What does the orange line indicate on the graph?
So yeah, so the orange line on this graph just shows the indication of the progression of the project lifecycle from the foundation component to the more specialized area. So it kind of shows you, for example, somebody starts at the foundation and that individual is now very interested in business relationship management, then they would start getting more specialized in that area and they become a business relationship management champion within the organization, and there would be courses that you could take and certifications you could take in the ITIL space to help you get to that track. And I know, Connie, you really provided this slide too. If there's any more context you want to add to the slide, feel free to add more information on that.
No, I agree with your description. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, great. And it just shows you the time frame. Normally, to get the ITIL expert, you would probably need at least, if you have a very demanding work schedule, you want to give yourself 12 months to get to an ITIL expert credentialing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, good. Then we move on to the next slide, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. So one thing to stress here, again, is service management is not a project. It's a way of life. It's a program. So you really need to understand, first of all, what your vision is. What are the business drivers and pain points that are driving service management? You don't want to do service management just for the sake of doing service management. There has to be a core burning platform or reason for it. Then you want to assess where you are. And when we talk about assessment, I'm just not talking about process assessment. You really want to assess yourself holistically, meaning first take a step back, and that 1 to 5 scale that I showed earlier, the reality organization, on a 1 to 5 scale, where do you land in those areas? And then you can drill down those specific areas to understand, okay, what processes would best support in addressing those pain points. So if customer is an issue, lack of customer outcomes, you're really technology focused, Well, we know from a service management standpoint, to improve the customer experience, you need to have the business relationship management role. You need to have strong service level management. You need to have service catalog. So you can kind of translate those attributes that were presented earlier to specific areas within service management, and then you could assess those specific areas from a 1 to 5 scale to see how well you're doing in those areas, and then come up with recommendations for those specific process areas. And those recommendations, again, would be prioritized based on your core business value guidelines or guiding principles, right? So back to the example of employee, client, shareholder, right? Which one's the most important? Evaluate it as 1 to 5, add those scores up, and that gives you a total score for that recommendation. You do that for all those recommendations for that area you assessed, and then you can determine which ones you want to implement first. You also understand the level of effort, right? Is it going to take 0 to 3 months to implement, 6 to 12 months, 12 months to 18 months, or 18 months or greater? And then based on that, you can also prioritize. So the ones that take 0 to 3 months and they have a high impact on client satisfaction and employee satisfaction, you want to do those first, which I referred to those as quick wins. The ones that take a lot longer to implement but might not have as much impact, you want to consider those, but you might want to do those last. And the ones that have a lot of impact and value and require moderate effort or significant effort, you also want to consider those. So it's just a way of prioritizing where you are now and how to implement. And the measurable targets, you need to really understand what are your core targets that you're shooting for, and have an established continuous service improvement program to effectively measure those targets, right? Where do we want to be, and how do we get there where we want to be? And the assessment will help you. The assessment results will help you identify those improvement areas. And making sure the metrics and reporting are value-driven. Again, it's not just technical metrics, but how they support the business itself. And then you have to make sure those metrics are actionable. If I can't act upon those metrics, then I'm not going to take the organization to an effective level. They have to be actionable. Again, they have to be at the business level that provide value. And how do we keep the momentum going? Meaning that we treat this as a program and a way of life, not just as a project. And that goes back to the importance of awareness, training, communications, organizational change, understanding what's in it for me. Those strong messages. It'd be basically a service management program awareness campaign that would get people excited, enthusiastic, and really understand their role in making an operational transformation. So we'll go to the next slide. So back again, one of the strongest examples of a good implementation of service management is basically it's a way of life, right? So from an enlightenment standpoint, you need to ask yourself these type of questions when you're thinking on embarking on service management, or if you're in the midst of a walking dead implementation within your organization, how can you turn that around, kill the zombie and make it useful and make it a successful implementation, right? So what are things we need to consider? So, for example, is IT within your organization seen as a technology provider or a trusted advisor? So we need to start going to the trusted advisor role. The business and IT need to work in an integrated manner. They need to be part of the board discussions. Does a business relationship management role exist within your organization to really establish and foster strong partnership? Most organizations don't have this role. It's a crucial role to really understand the business unit's needs, and the BRM can then communicate to the service level manager within IT to really solidify the requirements that really provide value to the business. Do you truly have actionable metrics? Again, we talked about earlier, if the metrics you provide cannot be acted upon to provide business value, then you need to ask yourself, why are we capturing that metric? Do you have a change organization enablement strategy? So what are you doing to foster enthusiasm and really communicating service management in a way that really supports the guiding principles of your company? And how do you make sure that it's clear what's in it for me? Are you taking an integrated approach when implementing service management? Are we looking at things from an end-to-end service perspective and not in a siloed perspective? Are you ensuring service management supports your company's guiding principles and core vision? Here's where a lot of organizations fail in service management, is they're so focused on process improvement they forget about the guiding principles of the organization, right? So if you go into, let's say, the military has a very fine-tuned way of running things, right? They have a certain culture, and they have an objective in the organization, and that's to save lives and protect, our liberties. And if those service management objectives don't support those core guiding principles, why are we doing service management? We have to show that there's a link between that, right? So you have good awareness, readiness, training, and communication within your organization on the benefits achieved. So as you start going through the transformation within your organization, you should have communications going out to stakeholders saying, this is where we're at right now, these are the accomplishments we've done. After we've implemented this continual improvement initiative, we are able to increase client satisfaction by 50%, reduce outages by 20%, improve profitability by a certain amount. Those kind of things are very core to providing a continuous message within an organization. If you don't do that constant communication, then the value of service management is seen as a project and not a program. And then back to continuous service improvement champion, you really need somebody in an organization to be focused on continual improvement initiatives, somebody dedicated to those efforts, integrated with the business, and identifying those initiatives that are going to take the business to the next level. If you have that as a part-time job, it's not going to go anywhere. You really have somebody dedicated as a CSI champion or performance champion to really work across the enterprise to capture those initiatives and take them to the next level. And do you treat service management as a program, way of life versus a project? So a project has a start and end. A program does not have a start. It has a start but does not have an end. It's a continuous journey, right? So it's a way of life, and it's something you need to have inherent part of your DNA. The way I compare it to is, if you want to get in shape, if you work out for 1 week and you feel, okay, I worked out for a week, I'm going to be in shape the rest of my life, that's not going to work. You got to constantly be exercising, taking care of yourself, eating well on a daily basis, and it has to be a way of life to be effective. So that's how we see service management is there has to be care and feeding on a daily basis. On service management, you have to follow rigorous principles and always keep your eye on the target and ensure that it aligns with the business objectives. Any questions, Connie, on that?
Thank you very much, Alex. I would like to mention that there is a white paper written by Alex that goes along with this webinar, which is on the same topic, service management implementation. You're welcome to contact us at info@itpreneurs.com to request a copy of it. At the beginning of the session, I mentioned that Aurelia and I will look after a portfolio of learning solutions in IT service management. And during this webinar, you also heard from Alex about the importance to create strong awareness and service management training and readiness program. I would like to give you some information regarding the different possibilities of training that are available through the partners of ITpreneurs. First, the ITIL Experts program that uses a mix of self-paced study and also instructor-led interactive teaching to provide the learners the most efficient path to achieve the ITIL expert level. Available for both the life cycle and capability courses and the MALC, it will be completed at a time and pace convenient to the learner, reducing the number of days spent in a classroom by half. The blended learning approach is highly learner-centric. That means less time away from the office, reducing travel and lodging time and cost, and also reducing the cost for organizing the program. When the traditional classroom learning combines lecture with exercises and group sessions, in the blended learning approach, the learners will complete the knowing components of the course in their own time and at their own pace, and participate in the classroom session for the experiential learning. In addition, we also offer the TIPA Tutor IT Process Assessment, which is an internationally recognized framework for IT process assessment that is based on the ISO IEC 15504 standard and completely aligned with ITIL. It offers a turnkey solutions that offer a complete set of tools that are available for you to conduct IT process assessment. And we offer the certification program for you to make use of TIPA for IT process assessment by taking the courses to become either a lead assessor or an assessor for TIPA. In addition, we also offer the CapNaTrago program. CapNaTrago is recommended as best practice for problem analysis in the official ITIL publication, using the methodology in troubleshooting starting from situation appraisal, which is to clarify and prioritize the situation, followed by problem analysis to find root cause, to decision analysis to select the best fix, and potential problem analysis to avoid future problems using risk analysis. There is a competence development track available for you interested in problem and incident management, starting with the CapNaTrago foundation course and followed by the advanced level in problem management extension and incident management extension. So we would like to thank you again for participating in this webinar, and you are most welcome to contact us regarding information on the learning possibilities that are available via the partners of ITpreneurs. Thank you.